I just want to say, first of all, that my partners Shane and Betsy, we merged some years ago. I think because we just had a direct interest in making things, but also trying to make places as well, and offer kind of an environment, an atelier culture, whatever you want to call it, that could work certainly well in our scale. We know that we're sort of a smaller office right now, and I was just telling someone earlier, my sports analogy is just because the scales of operation might be what they need to be for various offices, like a basketball point guard, if you're smaller doesn't mean you can't still kind of make it happen next to 6'7" players. And I think that's kind of good for everyone to know that everyone could kind of take part in trying to make something happen. Okay, so this is, just to get out of the way, this is my little guy, his name's Foster, jumping around. And that's the R.C. Harris filtration plant by the, just towards, past the beaches in Toronto. And I don't know what it was, that just kind of had me stick this here, but I think it seems fitting, just because that day it needed to go to a place that just felt right, felt natural, and was easy to get to. And guess what? It's a filtration plant. It's a piece of utility. It's infrastructure. So the words that we already just heard not long ago, actually, in the previous presentation about something that actually is special that the city gives back. That people, someone, not maybe just Roland Harris, but others too, hopefully, had the foresight to think ahead, and this has always been an important sort of image for me. The Prince Edward Viaduct. I'm sure a lot of you know this. Of course, it's not quite a bridge, I guess. It's a viaduct across the valley, and just to kind of get the context right. And I love this image for me. And some of you, I'm sure, know the story. But somewhere around the Great War, World War I, this guy actually says, "Listen, folks, I'm the public works kind of guy. Trust me on this one. I'm going to say we're going to build this thing across this huge ravine, and just hold on a second, just wait. I want to build an undercarriage for the subway. Well, I know we don't really have it yet, but just trust me. And who knows when, but we're going to go east." And so this guy actually had the clairvoyance, whatever you want to call it, a kind of urban narrative ahead of him to say, we've got to do this. And if you kind of extract different things from today, is this kind of part of the story that we're just reliving? We're trying to be a part of that same narrative. This is nothing new, right? These guys were probably thinking about the same thing at that time. How do we think ahead? How do we get our sense of invested dollars and efforts and interests into something that'll pay it forward, that'll go on to next generations? And so thank goodness for this. Thank goodness for someone. I don't even know where the city would be. If Andre was here, he'd probably be up here grabbing the microphone right now to say, what would we do without that subway system sort of ability to kind of actually cut across? So for me, this is an interesting sort of physical piece in the landscape. Looks like an Aldo Rossi cover of Architecture of the City. I don't know what it is. It's our monument. Just ask Michael Ondaatje. And I think this is the kind of thing that sort of helps center maybe even my own interests. And it's something I think is just actually important to show here. Of course, that's along the ravine systems. And it's funny just to show this kind of singular layer of data. Obviously, we all know that our sort of gridded network systems, as we see those 10 square grids back for the military days of what started Toronto, and how these kinds of systems kind of just arbitrarily overlaid our city. Of course, you got ravines, but even looking back at Kim's or Andre's or several Laurie's, Michael's, sort of layers that we are also contending with. This is just one of them. And, it's funny, we have to really ask ourselves, is our city responding well enough to those edges? We saw some of that just moments ago. Are we actually do we have enough wherewithal, or at least time to say, why don't we react a little bit more to original sort of layers or new ones too? It's just a bit of an image of some of the things that we were doing, whether built or not, in the kind of central part of Toronto. You can see sort of the areas where there's not the built form. And our spot is actually very close to where Kim just showed one of her studies on Carlaw. It's funny, that's the Wrigley building, 100 years old this year. And this kind of circles back to a conversation just for lunch, which is, how about this? Someone decides to build a gum chewing factory that who knew, or did they know, that thing would be resilient enough the way they built it, it was actually in, Robert Hill from KPMB actually sent me a nice little note saying congratulations moving there, because that was in pencil points or whatever, way back when it was widely published across North America, because it was one of the first reinforced concrete structures of that type, of that scale, almost hitting 4.5 meters per floor. And who knew that there would be that kind of interest in that kind of space that could last, even as people move forward and get out of the way. I have a bit of a theory too, which is it's kind of this sort of weird cycle of gentrifications, from photographers to cupcakes, which is, it's the photographers that are renegade enough to say they need space, they're a little different, they don't care, they don't really need a neighborhood actually, but they'll go to cheap space, they'll get out there first. That's frankly what happened in this space. And then all the cooler, slightly less cooler, maybe graphic designers, architects, they all start to follow up. The cafes start to show up, the cheese shop starts to show up, and then the dog shops to show up, and then it's kind of done when Starbucks, you think, but no, the cupcakes. Therefore, your realistic kind of arc stops right around there. Something to think about in terms of gentrified sort of cycles. This is us in that space. You can see we're looking about 13 feet clear, and these kinds of questions cycle through even some of the projects we're looking at too. We got the big, the little library behind us there, which is a good way to show some of the things that I think is a context in which I was taught. These are books that were given to me while I was teaching by a German man, Hans Lucke. Some of you may know him. He handed me that book that all Germans seem to have when they study architecture. And I was so moved by the fact, next to some I don't know, was it Greek architecture, that our city hall was there, and what it meant to Toronto at the time. So these are the ostensible poles of our design world that not just me, but many generations here today, probably all of us, were influenced by. Actually, on the right-hand side was my own drawing. I got asked to reissue the drawing of the reflective ceiling plan at the banking pavilion. Detlef Mertens asked me to draw it back then by hand. I redrew it for, I guess, a Phaidon book that's coming up. But just the graphics, the belief in the city, the understanding that there's actually something in our water that made our city kind of get those the competition for Nathan Phillips Square and City Hall, and also Phyllis Lambert to do her thing to get this over here at King and Bay. You got to wonder whether that actually makes a difference for us. These drawings contextualizing Toronto in a study that ensued with some Masters of Architecture students and Urban Design students at the University of Toronto about a decade ago. We're sort of one part of just contextualizing Toronto and its kind of relative densities. And graphically, we like the kind of Eames sort of powers of 10 idea, which I did along with Bridget Shin when we taught this course. We didn't have to, but we decided for some crazy reason to do sort of a pamphlet architecture, just a kind of first run at these ideas. And it was this, which was just our documentation of a series of students' projects, but really the kind of the lead up to it. And I look at this a lot because the kind of background for me in terms of cities, and I think this is really good. There's a reference to my wife who's on this TO Core project, which is interesting because a lot of people, from the people who write Spacing magazine to Matt Galloway on radio talking about cities as much as he can, to the kind of culture we are in Toronto, that I think we're very lucky. You could see, for me, many of us, I'm sure, is the upper left corner, vacant lottery. Barton Myers Barton Myers and George Baird dedicated that to Jane Jacobs, 1978. Same year as Delirious New York, interestingly enough, and I think Colin Rowe's book with Fred Coder. And that was actually done out of the University of Minnesota Walker Art Center, which positioned Toronto morphologically as a real and relevant study point for North American architecture. We don't always have to look to Europe. We love Europe, but there's just something different. We started a different way. Stephen Hall cites in the Pamphlet Architecture series, Urban and Rural House Types, he talks about Toronto and the double house types. I love the fact that he had the ability and foresight to not talk about his designs, just study. And he would look at Philadelphia houses, he would look at dog trot houses, he would look at the Toronto double house, which we might affectionately call the Bay and Gable house, and cites George Baird. It started to make me think, what's going on here, and then I had a chance to work with Ren Koolhaus and Nigel Smith on the reissued Delirious New York. Again, sort of more interested sort of ideas of the kind of published knowledge. Detlef Mertens asked me to help out with Delirious New York. And things like On Building Downtown, Built Form Analysis, these are important documents that I think makes my life easier. I got to believe many others too, because there's something that just situates what we're trying to do. And so those were the covers for the book and the studies and the kind of timeline of everything that kind of surrounded the history of the city, both by precedent afar and within the city too. And the last time the Leeds won the cup as well, if you look closely. So whether we look at the macro scale right down to details of things, studies that, particularly with Shane Williamson and Betsy in my office, we were not afraid to try to see where things might take us in terms of digital tools that could overlay, quite literally, with the physical things that we're doing. I keep pushing them, they keep pushing me that, let's be as progressive as we can, but I say, but let's try to work unplugged as well. And I think it's a good sort of dynamic. Just some studies also of what I call the Lola Table. Anyone who knows in the 70s, that ice kind of tetrahedron thing, that would be the joinery piece for these series of legs for a cafe that I was looking at furniture for. This is, again, just other sort of levels of detail for layered on-angle aviation plywood that when you CNC cut it a certain way, you get this, what was called the peephole, bit of a Tapio Verkala kind of look if anyone follows their Finnish mid-century designers. And so this is the kind of thing that I know Shane and Betsy really worked a lot on just prior to when we merged in the kinds of parts of fabrication that could be good components to certain parts of the buildings. Nested fabricated pieces, certainly how that would work in the space. Mock-ups we try to do a lot of in this kind of weathering barn board type of surfacing for a project up north near Collingwood. And then just, I know this isn't urban, but this kind of touches on a kind of a position for this project we've been looking at for kind of a longer term sort of project for a food community up near Haliburton. Has a series of modular greenhouses that would then be strung along. There's a whole number of things in cross-section that would work there to make it work. But one of the things that we had as part of that sort of village was, of course, some kind of hub of a marketplace. And where I really bring up this project is for this little, this little guy here, which is really, the word catalyst came up in a similar way. In my way, part of the role of the architects, I wonder these days, is that we are not so far down the line anymore. We may actually get that call a lot sooner, where people kind of, but don't really know what they're after. And that's fine by me, because I think sometimes they need that sort of facility or the ability to air out their thoughts. And this is one of the things that they did not know that they were wondering whether they should do, which is something of a kind of a Kickstarter project, one that could just let them have a bit of a hub, a place where they could have summer harvest dinners, where they could actually have people to get invited for the first round of donors. It's a kind of thing that as architects we could help invent, if not Jedi talk, as I was telling someone earlier, how to tell people that they actually can do something meaningful if they just kind of listen to some of the ideas that we might generate as well. It's okay, I want to believe, that we could be somewhat prescriptive in a respectful manner in order to get the best value for these kinds of projects. And this here was related to things for that food hub up north. This here was just one of the many pavilions that we would do as part of our studies in the larger project of just doing things like for the interior design show. It was weird because it was all indoors, but we called it natural light, because it was actually for a window company who we thought it'd be kind of fun to play it up in the middle of February back then, and it was nice to be able to kind of test out ideas. So it would be these kinds of pavilions. I actually did one earlier, and it was 400 square feet. They said, "What do you got? What are you thinking?" And it came down to this one week when I guess the week that Jane Jacobs passed away. It was Matt Galloway who called me in, asked me about the Laneway architecture study that we did. Among the things he asked was, what's with our fascinations with things being so small? And I just kind of started saying, well, I mean, it's nothing new across the world, even in Europe. I was just in Switzerland, I told him, and I said, I was that entitled North American in my little apartment, tiny little apartment, and I was like, how do you do this? And this is so tiny. And I said, I got it, I get it. My fruit bowl really is a fruit bowl again. I can actually go out into the streets, I can meet with the people, I could get my fruits, my cheeses, my loaves of bread. I said, okay, I got it. It's small fridges make good cities. Something that makes you realize that what you're doing on the inside of your home can actually make a difference, perhaps, with the neighborhood. Your grandmother would have figured this out. This is the kind of thing where the fifth good reason is you're probably eating a lot better. Forget just the packaging, the driving, that's a lot less. Where can we start to think that we can actually impact change in the city? And I won't lie, there's a point where when the interior design folks called me, I thought, I got to be careful. I don't want this just to be some indulgent design exercise, because that just kind of is dead-ended. And it just seemed right to do this. That really rippled out there. And this is just how I did it, where in this tiny little space we put together, that's the carve-out for the still life. You'll see that in a second. It's interesting, too, still life paintings, if you think about it. People were so proud of their harvest. That's the urban harvest table, I call it. That they were so proud. They would take the time to paint the damn thing. Think about that. People actually were so proud of what they gathered in their environs. Why may we not try that? And where seasonality might be part of the space, too. So folks like Jamie Kennedy helped out with the preserves. It was just kind of fun to put this thing together. And people thanked me for saying, this is everything I didn't know I wanted. And I like hearing that. We try to push details, deeper sills for areas that are going to kind of have the herb sort of bowls or other things. And I think, where can the detail help process maybe a larger idea? Even deep set windows with Marcel Mulder, if anyone knows him, good window maker. Right down to what I call the pasta rail, because I designed it so you could hang fresh pasta. Of course, so you could get it to fit out plate rails and other hooks too. And of course, that little candle flute that's under production or on its way to production with milk. So that was, I think, what was important to me, to be able to make some kind of inner statement, I think, that might even reach beyond what you're just doing for yourself. This project is near Roncesvalles, near Sorauren, actually, and some of you may have seen this before. It's, I'm going to point to this, I think it's there, yeah, so right there, it kind of is like a bookend to a site right there, across from this large church, and it's about 13 feet 7 inches wide by 126 feet long. It really tests your ability to do things in terms of narrowness. And so that's the site situation there. I pulled this image from our studies, kind of a nod to the way George, Baird, and Barton did their own studies. It's really interesting, too, just if you think about the fact that our urban blocks, the real medium, I think, of the city, it's just so resilient that I think we just kind of got it right. Other cities, I think, kind of missed proportionately. But the fact that we could get these great sort of what I call, there's a whole alphabet of T blocks, H blocks, all these different things that kind of let us subdivide. And a good analogy is like the Aesop's fable, is this thing full when you pour in the rocks? Yeah, no, not quite. Well, is it full? You poured in the pebbles? Yeah, no, not quite. It's the sand, it's the water, so you could still get a lot out of our blocks, which is really great. On top of the fact that we have the infrastructural tax, the tax base would grow, infrastructure's still there, it needs a lot of work still, but isn't this a good way to kind of make a good use of our land? And of course, I always like this kind of little drawing that I wanted to just kind of put out there. That would be that same sort of a double house, if you will. Was that the kind of last prototype for a little while? I mean, there's been many since, but what happens when your lot divides, and what spits out, and what's its relative sort of density and on these places? And could there be, or should there be, for every architect, some hope that there's some kind of idea of prototype, if only for the fact that you're trying to look ahead and see what, the Wayne Gretzky line, where's the puck going to go? This thing here is the piece of land that if you build it properly with the city, of course, it would leave you with about 13 feet outside dimensions. Actually, that's right. Inside dimensions were about 11 foot 10 altogether. And then, of course, with all our conditions of the side limiting setbacks, limiting distances, of course, you can't have any light on the sides. So this is all about trying to drive in light, including having the skylight back there, which would even out the light on both sides. So from an optical point of view, it won't be so harsh. You could look right in. I learned that from a restaurant owner in Stratford. He said he spent as much time trying to balance the level of light in the day as the sun went down, as much as he did with the menu, because if it was a mirror effect, it would really rub people wrong. I think it does to us when that happens in the city. I tried my best to kind of keep that in there. I think it worked. For the most part, if there's anything to take out of this thing, it's that I want to try to make the stairs in certain areas turn fairly quickly. I wanted to put the stair towards the front because I didn't think it'd be right. I thought it'd be a bit of a crime to put a bedroom the front. Meanwhile, I want to drive in light. We all know in Toronto there's always that little nook in the corner that lets light into the middle dining room, the middle bedroom. Here I didn't have the luxury. And so it was about stealing natural light. And the detail mattered. I knew right away it was going to have some kind of open space at the front. These are just some quick snaps of just the moment frames. If anything, even if I preferred a gingerbread sort of syntax, I would need to have open spaces. I think modernism is a tool. It's not just a de facto style. And lateral forces, lateral systems are huge for us. That alone changes cities if we have the ability to make those work. There's a system of different ways of getting up the heat up there. My first real hole I dug under my name alone, and it really kind of turned your stomach in a good way. And so yeah, we have this stair that comes along the front. It actually helps with lateral stiffness as well. And there's a detail in here you'll see coming up, which I just loosely called my urban detail. There's this skylight there. But this little guy, 1/8-inch bent metal plate, has enough stiffness once you just turn it in the X, Y, and Z. And then, just kind of sifting through the right number of gaskets and all that to just get the right sort of ability to get these pieces in and just to work it all out. If I could save a quarter or 1.25 inches here or there, then that actually means I could turn that stair. It means that I could make that layout, which means I could then go for that piece of property. And we just borrowed a lot of light from the sides, as much as we could. This is now becoming I get calls from all around the world asking how we could somehow employ this elsewhere, because it's, if people know Le Corbusier's PASSAC project, that might have helped me sort of think about this again, where, yeah, you could line them up side by side because they would effectively work because they don't have any walls with openings. This project, just on the edge of Scarborough, not far away from the filtration plant, is a wide lot. We severed it. And so this is about the infill homes that really, when we detail them to work within these spaces that are otherwise seen as orphaned or not interesting or scares people away, that's when we strike. That's how I told the owners to kind of go for this. We worked with the city to help get this severed. There was actually a tree in the back that the neighbors, though it was our right to build outward and lose a tree, we decided to keep it, which meant that this building, a little wider than the galley house, was less deep. It meant that we had to have one room. Well, it's two uses, but one room, our kind of kitchen studio. There's a piano nobile, really, over here. You'll see in a second what we're doing there, because we're getting the double cantilever and a tension rod on diagonal there, which is right over here, also to let the light in that corner. Without that, this project doesn't work. So just trying to drive that in. And on a budget, of course, we're just trying to work with our dollars, saving it for the lower level. This area here, this one, again, the details in the millwork really counted, trying to get the right kind of aisles. And this overhang was the living room. So this is the kind of the one combination studio, kitchen studio. The details here worked out real hard just to make sure we could save the overhangs of 1 inch or so. Knife edged all these things. It actually weeps well, so it dries nicely. Gave us the extra 2 or 3 inches across the whole room. Means we could do this. They were decidedly all about being clean, but I like the fact that we could show something like a small fridges make good cities project, and this too. And then that's the knife edge right there, you could see. So that's how this project worked. Without doing that, then I wouldn't even know where to begin with trying to get light into that spot, because we couldn't have any perpendicular facing unprotected openings. And these are the things that actually inspire us, not shackle us, we don't kind of hang our head. We try to run with it. And the backside here, which actually has had to step back and lurch out because the distances around the tree, we had to make sure the angles were posed, didn't disturb that canopy drip line. This project was it's actually along the ravine system. And just showing this to you also to show you just the different kinds of projects that we're given, that we try our best to just keep a control on those limitations, so-called, in the city, but to try to make it work for us. And so this whole side here, we only gave it up to certain areas, particularly the back side, which you'll see in a second here, which opens up to basically one of the battle line spurs, I guess, which if you walk on it now because it's decommissioned, will take you, like a lot of people, right to the Evergreen, which is a nice little path for all the families that use it, actually. So it's a little fuzzy here, but so yeah, so a triple sort of system that closes out and opens up that way. What I just loved here was the amount of ventilation that comes through here. It just runs through, and it really takes advantage of the hillside. And you'll see some kind of running sort of details, things that modify and change project to project, largely starting from that Small Fridges Make Good Cities project. Still adapted differently for these other ones as well. And then just this is interesting. A family with choosing not to have a car, wanting to rent out their basements to University of Toronto, I guess students or professors. The mother of this owner is actually a Order of Canada winner for immigration policies, so she's kind of got built into her the idea that having international students is really good with them, because as someone rightly pointed out, I think it was Michael, that these things were filled with many people, not just the family of four, and they get it. They frankly get it because their dollars need to work. So it's interesting, the stigma is over, at least with a lot of our clients, where they got mom and dad as part of their equation. They actually help get this thing rolling, but they also know that they're not going to be there right away because they're still able-bodied. So we actually detailed it so that downstairs the basement would work for the meantime for whoever rents it. As the kids get older and the parents get older, they would then move in. And then I tried to detail that in a way that lets the condition on the side where you enter be adaptable for the idea that the house is a dynamic thing. It's not static. We know that. It's like the cities we're talking about. I think Alberti said you should be able to design a city like a house and a house like a city. So the old thing that was chopped up with servants' quarters, the whole deal, and what we did is we ran millwork, which might look like we kind of had a field day on it, but that's the difference of us having 450 square feet in the basement, because through here we could get all the storage we needed. And then we kept this L stair just so it would work, because we didn't want to reconfigure the upstairs too much. And then we get this, which lets us flow through. You see on the side, that's the light that's about 4 feet away from the actual window. It lets the people go beneath them, and they still get light coming in. To your left, about a bay or two, is this equivalent detail, which just might look like a panel door, but if you look over here, I designed it so that this little pencil box detail for the kids in a weekend, that could pop out, and there's a door. So that door then comes back. And this is where we're proud of trying to say, does that kind of thinking let us get the house in the first place, right? And then suddenly their own little dollars and cents sort of big picture makes sense to even get them to do that, because they're happy to walk to work and go where they got to do by transit. And of course, just keeping other details throughout the house, as it were, on the back side. So this thing, same kind of story. We had a family who owned a corner lot near Chinatown. Where is it actually? It'd be right here. And they had 2 corner pieces. So it was this thing. It was about the fault. Like people were squatting. It was there, but it was an older family. Actually, the younger generation was kind of ready to do it. This is the younger generation that probably 15 years ago wouldn't go near it, but they said, let's do it. You know, in the city, there's different sort of definitions of how you do sort of multiple sort of units of living. This is a duplex that we want to do, and it's up to the owners if they want to do a cheater third party, but that's up to them, as most of Toronto seems to work, but legally a duplex. And so this corner was about having a courtyard, but because it had 2 entry points, we just wanted to have a project that had a common stair that would split up the family who wanted to live in there the first time with the parents. Unlike the other project, they wanted to be able to live on the uppermost floor. They were going to decide how to move and mix it around and let the family of 3 grow in their own sort of semi-private way in one house, actually. And then the other part would be a rental. And they each had their own interest of having their own sort of private garden spaces. So we just tried to kind of offer a lot of light, but with levels of privacy and 2 points to enter. And it's interesting because on this corner, we really wanted to kind of say, this is a project that's all about trying to see the bigger picture. There it is with the brick that we had started it with. Some of the studies there. And this thing here, this is interesting. So I called it this is Metropolis magazine asked me to send this in. I called it Towards a New Proforma, because the other elephant in the room is this is what everyone's thinking about. There isn't a time that we have with these projects with multiple units, multiple family sort of components, multi-generational homes, where they're not thinking about, okay, well, what about them and their older folks who are going to put in some amount of dollars with them and a little kid who then might grow up enough while these older folks might get widowed, and then while this guy gets older, comes back later with a girlfriend or maybe a wife, they have a kid or two, and you start to see that people kind of think this way. They don't know for sure, but we're trying to say, can you have a configurability that lets this house actually work so that it works with their usual 25-year sort of mortgage sort of curves, and then whatever dollars they get from rent, they start to see it sort of for future dollars for other kinds of things. And so can we actually start to see the design, even for a house, that gets the fact that it could work and move and actually start to evolve. And I think that's the thing that I've embraced, I hope to, in the design we do. It's not just make it look cool, it's trying to do something, right down to details in how certain doors, certain partitions would work. I'm just throwing in this project. It was a little while ago I did this, and it's interesting, kind of hard act to follow with Kim's and James's beautiful work of their stuff. This is something that the Globe Mail once asked something of me to do, and it's curious. They said, can you do a park on the cheap? Kind of a blunt sort of series of words for a request. And I thought, what does that mean? But I said, okay, fine. Here we go. I said, I know a place where it should be, and I always thought that this is one of the most underrated views of the city. You know, it's busloads of people come here, but it's complete with little bins and little you know, gas outlets for all the old pollution that was, or I guess the garbage dump that it was back then, methane I guess it is, but beautiful views, and somewhat treacherous in a way to get down. I thought, wouldn't it be good to have some series of viewing platforms for space, kind of on the edge. And I thought, wouldn't it be good if, however, you know, I'm starting to see, but hold on a second, it's pretty hard as it is to create new spaces in the city. You know, there's that kind of double curve, the curve of depleted funds or materials, but then are there areas in which there's actually an excess, there's surplus, and could that actually be something like wood maybe, perhaps, coming from public parks, let's just say, or public buildings, let's just say. So when a tree gets felled, could it actually be material for parks that are designated, maybe annually? So this is just kind of a proposition kind of project, a prescriptive one. So what if maybe then you could say for, let's just say, public buildings, if you could identify that, then you could get a certain amount of wood when it's dressed and kind of there. You could get the same kind of community effort, the same kind of people who actually would do skating parks or want to do that kind of community kind of sort of involved type of thing. Could it be the means of the materials for an annual deck? And could this deck, that if it actually just kind of went along the topography just enough so that it wouldn't be a guard at 600 millimeters max, that could allow people to then switch back, but it'll only switch back for as much material as you could actually properly make it with. So then, it's actually not being designed, it's maybe being scripted. It almost sounds like a parametric software conversation, but really it's actually being set so that whatever you're given then will be maybe that year. And then you're only as good as that year because of the public buildings maybe that came to you, that gave you the best cuts. And you could even compare that with other people trying the same project in other parts of the country to say, hey, we had a pretty good year, you know? And so maybe it takes about, I don't know, 15, 16 of these things to actually make it down there. Because frankly, it's impossible to get down there. You can still toboggan, you can still do your ultimate frisbee thing, but can you actually have a place to be? And so could it be a series of these kinds of structures that give you a little bit of protection from shade, place to sit? And then what was great about this is, you know, this is just me giving it a go, and I like the fact that it got people thinking. And this is kind of coming back to, what are we as architects? Like, who are we? I mean, are we just waiting for the phone call for the enlightened client with an enlightened sort of frame of mind? Like, since when were we not the kinds of people that had good ideas too? Just something to think about. No, and I think that's important for us, because where does our authorship, our willingness to prescribe, where can that fit into the bill? Because I don't think it should just be about that phone call. And I think it's up to us. It's that kind of weird superhero thing, you know. We have a little bit of, I don't want to call it power, but skill for sure. But therefore we have responsibility, you'd think. This is Wagstaff Lane in Toronto near Greenwood and Gerrard. Got these guys from Pilot, actually Tiaro Cafe. They just said they needed a place to have a warehouse. They looked everywhere. We checked old movie theaters. We did everything. They loved this because it's so close to the house. They could get all their folks to bike there, walk there. Even their delivery guy is a guy who cycles. And it's real. It's not just for show. Rebecca Condon at City of Toronto called me up, loving this thing, because I was worried, because when the City of Toronto calls, you're not sure what's up. But they loved it. And I think it was because they'd like to see that this kind of project was the perfect storm in which there were people actually starting to move on from their ownership. They got younger people who were saying, let's try something different. And so these folks decided to do a space with production for coffee because of the thermal conditions that were allowed back then for the kind of heating and cooling minimums that were required for the kind of auto body shop that it was. I created little buildings within buildings. So they had the roaster there. But these little buildings let them have a certain kind of world where they could also have tasting bars. Oops. And I think with these tasting bars, it actually pushed the city to rethink their I-1, I-2 designations. They weren't sure about cleanliness, but there was nothing in there for coffee roasters. No one knew. And this is a city just saying, hey, you know what, we're learning too. And that was great to hear, because we always kind of give them a hard time to say, wow, how come you don't know what's going on? And they said, listen, 1986, we wrote these definitions down, things change, right? So it's great to see that we found a way to work within here to get a tasting bar. It's sort of like a cool ramen bar where people just go there. No Wi-Fi. It's not about hanging out there with your laptop and you know, with all your friends and buggies. It's actually just kind of there to kind of meet with the people. And that's the first ever of its kind. Those mod bars, it's called. And in there is the coffee lab with a sniff heights table, which really works for them blending their bits and pieces too. Yeah, so that was actually quite nice, and it led to next door a brewery now that asked us to do a microbrewery, and I got all kinds of calls for people wanting to do Montessori schools, which isn't really allowed, or little boutique hotels, which isn't quite there yet, or at all maybe. And so it's just interesting to see that Toronto is ready and willing to step it up. I think that's the one thing I noticed, is that there's a bit of a destination urbanism. People will go there. They don't need to stroll and be the flaneur. They could just come here because they want it. Thanks very much.